Hello, sexy people. Welcome to episode 4 of season 3. If you have just joined us, I am Robin of @tiredwitch on Instagram, and I'm with the beautiful, sexy, sensual, just 12 out of 10 gal, Maria from Maria the Arcane on Instagram.
Well, hello.
Fucking hype man over here.
Thank you so much for having me. I know. I feel so good.
Yeah.
I feel so good. Oh, yes. I'm going to have you, wake me up in the morning and just say that.
Yes. You know what? I should be your alarm. You should be one of those alarms that you can, put your own, ringtone over, and it'll just be going, bwam, 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 time to wake up, Maria.
Ew, no.
Yeah.
My wife has an alarm like that. I hate it.
Sorry, that's girl is a woman of taste. Sorry, she's a woman of taste. I don't really understand what the problem is here.
I like to be awoken by chimes and softly playing music. God. Please.
Sorry, no, this will be your intro. You ready? This will be your wake-up alarm. Ting, ting, ting. Maria, it's the morning. Time to get in the shower. Is that better?
Yes, that's so much better. 10 out of 10.
If you have just joined us this week, every single week we talk about upcoming lunar phases and how we can use them magically. That being said,
ominous.
Thank you. It's very ominous. That was the goal. I'm glad that I'm putting out when I'm trying to, or you're catching what I'm putting out. You know what I'm saying? Listen,
yeah,
we all know that expressions are not my strong suit, so just don't worry about it. Anyway.
Okay.
Shh, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Live, love.
Live, love.
It's fine.
It's really what I'm trying to say. Now I've got you saying it. So magically,
I just get it. I just say it so you say it. I'm sorry.
Good.
Go ahead.
I'm glad. I'm starting a revolution. Okay.
Reclaiming it.
I'm gonna make a big white sign, like a banner, and the banner's just gonna say "Live, laugh, love." Okay. Anyway, back to what anyone cares about, which is not live, laugh, love. Our nearest full moon that we have coming up is the Virgo full moon. Well, the nearest lunar phase that we have coming up is the Virgo full moon, which is on March 18th. In terms of how we can utilize the Virgo full moon, this is a really good time to get stuff done. Virgos rule work, productivity, tasks, chores, organization, schedules, and order. This is a good time to focus on spell work that essentially puts you in the driver's seat of getting shit done. Full moons are one of full potential. I know we've talked about this a bunch. You can kind of hone in on that energy for whatever you want. And when we're focusing on it, when it comes to organization and productivity, you might be looking at things like getting a promotion or any kind of job related magic. Because to get things like a job or promotion, quite frankly, you have to put in the time, the work, and the routine. The job is not going to find you.
Rude.
I know. We also are going to look at things like cultivating healthy habits, etc. So if you're going to be doing a spell work that potentially is going to bring in motivation for yourself or giving yourself a brand new routine for your life, and you just kind of need that little extra push of focus, this would be a good time to do spell work for that. The only problem with this moon that we might want to be aware of in terms of the kind of spell work, not necessarily to avoid, but just to be aware of, is that Virgo full moons, we can tend to push ourselves to a point of feeling very overwhelmed. So when we are doing spell work that is focusing on things like our schedule, our order, our organization, etc. Make sure that you're doing it in a way that is realistic and not trying to bite off more than you can chew. Otherwise, you might be very regretful and overwhelmed, and we don't want to see that happen. So, yes, focus on healthy habits. Yes, focus on spell work with organization and motivation, but keep it doable and realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. On the on our Patreon, we have like a monthly outlook sort of thing where I go into like the moon phases and what to expect in some spell work. I think like working on plans and stuff like that and working with spell work relating to plans being fulfilled would be very good this month. Like maybe doing a spell jar where you put your plans into like a jar and you put like correspondences, like herbs that correspond to that. And then also like success herbs, you know, like cinnamon, chamomile, or things like that. But that was one of the things that I mentioned on it. And I think, yeah, just and like working on plans that you've been working
to make it so pretty. So,
oh, thank you.
Pretty messed up, if I'm being honest. I want my articles to look that nice. Everybody can tell when it's one of my articles versus one of yours. I'm like, here's the information. And you're like, and here's the information, but done so aesthetically pleasing.
Look, if I have a chance to be creative, I'm going to go all in.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not a dig. You do such a good job. It's so beautiful. You've done such an amazing job. It's just so funny to me because every single time you do it, I'm like, well, everyone knows which one's Maria's and which one's mine. Mine is 5 paragraphs of straight like information, and yours is like, yeah, it's a lot of information, but look how pretty I can do it.
Look, I stress myself out in the process. So is it worth it? I don't know. Maybe, fair enough. I have to do it. And the stuff that you do creative, you do well. Jeez.
Thanks, Mom.
No
Thanks,
problem,
Mom.
honey.
Oh my goodness.
So, if you just started listening to us, every podcast we talk about a random tarot card. We go over the universal meaning and then our own interpretations of the cards. Hearing others' opinions helps beginners form their own opinions, or even those who have been practicing for a while expand their views on other meanings. So this week we're talking about Death Reversed. We actually spoke about this card upright in a previous episode, so I thought, especially with today's topic, we should bring it up and see what it means to us reversed. So there is a lot to say about what we see on this card, so bear with me. On this card, when it's upright, you'll see Death on a horse. You'll note that Death is wearing black armor while the horse is white, showing the balance of life. The horse also represents movement towards new beginnings. Death carries a flag with a flower on it, and as we know, when things die and feed the earth, that things die and feed the earth in order for new things to grow. Under the horse, you'll see a fallen king without a crown, which shows to me an exchange of power and how no one can stop death or transformation. A bishop stands in front of death. This can show enlightenment or even the spiritual gain of death and transformation. And the two other beings on this card are kneeling before death. And unlike the king, they are choosing to accept the change. Last but not least, you'll see a familiar scene in the background of the card. The towers from the moon card are represented here, and the sun shines over them rather than the moon. So like everything now is illuminated by the sun. And this to me represents to finally finding our path forward. The keywords to this card reverse shows resistance to change, lack of movement, and refusing transformation. Okay. So when this card comes up reversed for me in readings, it shows that someone is holding tightly to what once was. It is similar to like the 8 of Cups upright or reversed, but there's no chance of coming back or trying to be ignorant of the change we need to make because it's greatly affecting our lives and paths. This is because clinging to the past, especially what is no longer serving us, keeps us stagnant. keeps us from getting closer to our highest version of selves. I see this often in situations of like generational curses, staying in bad relationships, or even when we don't put energy into the things that we want to create for ourselves in our life. But it isn't just limited to those situations. It's different for everyone. But looking transformation in the face can be scary, just like looking at death in the face can be scary. It requires a mourning process and inner work. And I find that though, when we finally follow through with the hard stuff, everything comes into focus. We find that we do have a clear path forward, which is represented in the towers in the background with the sun illuminated them on the card. When most of us will never achieve our highest versions of self in this lifetime. When we accept death and transformation, we get closer to that. And, when this card is upright, it becomes a level up card. And as I said earlier, when we get closer to our highest version of self, wait 1 second. And as I said earlier, we get higher to our higher version of self when we choose to level up rather than remain stagnant. I see like death reverse paired with the tower card a lot when the universe and spirit says, it's time for change, and you better believe that they're going to do everything within their power to turn your world upside down to make you see it, that you need to accept this change and transformation. So how do you view this card, Robin, dear?
I hate this card. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. I fucking hate this card. Typically, it's such a call out for me that I need to let something go, and I'm refusing to do that. And I often see this card come up in times when it is an idea or person or similar that I'm obsessing over. Like when somebody wrongs you, or not in my particular case recently, at least, but in general, you get broken up with and you're just like still checking their social media and like you're worried about what they're doing, and it's like this card comes up and goes, let it go. It's such a call out for me. It's a this chapter of your life, this situation is over, you're holding on to it, you need to let it go. Like you said, it can be scary. It can be this lack of control or the loss of the situation, both emotionally and physically. And yet we're still sat here going, but I want to see if they're checking my Instagram stories, or, you know what I mean? It's such a call out for me, and I hate it because I am actually flawless, perfect, and wonderful in every way, and I do not deserve to be called out in such a way. I think it's a hate crime. I hate
How dare you?
So yeah, I really hate this card for that reason. It really sucks. I don't like seeing it. I don't like feeling so attacked. I am a baby and fragile.
That's why you only own one deck and a bunch of oracle cards.
I don't even think I own a whole deck. I think I only own half of a deck. Please
only
donate to a child in need. I am the child. For the record, I have not gotten a new deck in a really long time. Just for the record.
What?
I know.
Who is she?
Well, I've made it really clear to people that I'm trying to move and I don't want to take on anything new. And
I know. I still need to give you your Yule gift. Well, your winter solstice gift. I've been waiting for you to get over there so I can send it to you.
Soon. Soon. But yeah, I hate this card. I feel like it should be removed from my line of vision. I think as soon as I see that card come out, I'm like, all right, enough is enough here. All right, calm down. You're being very loud.
I'm just gonna put this back. No one saw it.
I think that I should shuffle again and see what else comes up. Oh, goodness.
Sounds about right.
So So it's been a really hot topic in our Discord because a few members took a class on it and they were chatting. So we thought today we would talk about said hot topic, which is death. Death as a concept, death in Magick, and just the general, I don't know, a general overview of death, as it were. It's just been a really hot topic in the Discord, and it brought up a really, really great conversation, in my opinion, within that. And people started talking about their experiences and their ideas of death and Magick. And so Maria and I thought, let's talk about that today. As a lot of you guys know, I specifically work with death in my practice. Maybe you don't know that. I think I talk about that enough, right? Do I?
I think so. Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe I don't. Let me know, guys. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, hi, my name is Robin. I work with death. That's like what I do in terms of witchcraft. I work with spirits. I work with La Santa Muerte. I work with death. Death is a concept. Death is a literal. All of it. Death is for the living, after all. And so today we're going to talk about that. And that being said, Maria, what does death mean to you in regards to Magick?
So when you asked me about if we should talk about this topic, I was so worried I wouldn't have much to say. That was such a small cog in my practice. But it is an important one that I use more often that at the surface, I immediately thought. I think that is the same for many witches. For some, it is a huge part, while others, for me, I know it's a part of a larger working, which is why so many people don't bring it up too often. And I think people also have strong opinions when it comes to death magic, since we all have different ways of working with it. But just the death card is just part of a huge process that that is involved in so many parts of our lives, which, definitely extends to our practices as well. Mm-hmm. But for me specifically, I work with transformative magic, which I do consider death, because in order to transform, part of us sometimes has to die, to be left in the past, if that makes sense. And I also work with a couple of goddesses that deal with death. And I also work with spirits and do spirit communication and have, I involve spirits also in my craft and things like that. So how about you?
Well, for me, I know that you and I have talked about this a bunch privately. I know that I haven't talked about this part so much on the podcast or even on my blog. But for me, death is an inevitable and a constant in everyone's life. Using it in the respective transformation magic, just like you said, I think is really important to recognize, because in my opinion, aside from our bodies physically dying, I feel like metaphorically we all die multiple times in our life. I know that, for example, I died the day that my child was born. The old me is not there anymore. There's a new version of Robin that exists now. And I am not that person that I was before. And while that is a scary concept and a scary idea, it is true. I died the day that I became a mother, and I was reborn this new person. Sometimes we die because of traumas that happen to us. Sometimes that we die because of incredible things that happen to us. But either way, we still have these massive transformations that come in our life. And I think that the sooner we're able to recognize that and embrace it as a constant and a part of our lives, the quicker it is to use it.
It's kind of like the Wheel of Fortune in tarot, like the ebbs and flows.
And it essentially puts us in this position where we can kind of move forward with knowledge, and knowledge is power, right?
Yes.
I also work with spirits, like we have discussed, and we'll get kind of more into that later, but there is a lot, I believe, of practice and prayer and dedication that comes with working with spirits, because these are people, right? Now they might not be in their physical self form anymore, but that isn't to say that they aren't still people. And in my practice, like I said, I work with Santa Muerte, and Santa Muerte, the big concept of all of it is that death comes for us all in the end. We're all equal. We can all ask for whatever we want, because quite frankly, it doesn't matter. We all die at the end of the day. And in that, it kind of gives us all this very even playing field, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think
makes sense.
I think for me, the idea of death being far less of a scary concept, and instead far more of an accepted reality that we can then work with and work in knowing, if you will.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power in that.
Exactly. I mean, like, death is such a big part of everyday life. I mean, even in nature, you know, when things die and rot and decay, it feeds our earth, so a new life can form. It's a necessary cycle that without it, we wouldn't have flowers in the spring, fertile soil. And as many of us wish to be immortal and live like thousands of years old, you know, death brings new generations, new ideas, and new achievements. Yeah,
I will never die.
So that must be a Cancer thing, because my wife is the same way.
Listen, I will never die. Me and my cat Emo will live forever.
Yeah. But
actually,
it really is just a huge necessary thing in life.
But also, speaking of nature, a lot of plants and are funguses considered a plant?
I think so, right?
I don't know.
You can grow fungus.
Fungi, I don't know if that's considered a plant or if it's like its own special thing. Listen, guys, I'm not a botanist, but I'm not certain if their fungus are considered plants or not. But plants and fungi also have a lot to do with death. Like you said, you have that cycle kind of a living thing dies,
decay.
It becomes rot, it becomes decay, but then that decay feeds things around it, whether by an animal eating that dead creature or by nature taking it back and it becoming fertilizer. But even if an animal eats it, it then goes through the body system and gets pooped out, that becomes fertilizer as well. And it's all becoming this like one large circle, right? And then simultaneously we have things like plants and fungi that become literal representations and metaphorical representations of death. I mean, you think of Persephone, we have the pomegranate, right? Which is a symbol of death, a repeating symbol of death. We have things like
accepting transformation.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have like cultural I want to say practices, but I don't mean it in the magical sense. I mean it in kind of like the cultural ritual of things such as funerary wreaths and plants you put out on somebody's grave. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, no, I totally know what you're talking about. It becomes this kind of
symbolic gesture of death as well. The gesture of so somehow someone has died and yet we are planting a rose bush, if you will, or you know, I don't know about you guys, but I've had loved ones die and we go and plant a tree for them, or we, you know, plant a bush, a rose bush or similar.
Yeah, and like a tree or something. It's
and yet we've lost someone. Yeah. We've lost someone, and yet we are doing this kind of rebirth symbolically, if you will. That's crazy, isn't it?
I love that. Yeah. So how do you use death in spell work?
That's a good question. I think it's a good question, but it's complicated. So first of all, for me, things like offerings are a really big part of my practice. Witchcraft is ultimately a craft, right? I know that there's been a lot of like internet discourse around like, quote, armchair witches. I'm not going to get into that. However somebody self-identifies is really not my business. But ultimately, for me, a huge part of my craft actually has way more to do with things like offerings and building a relationship, and not always doing spell work. I do spell work not that often. I probably do it maybe once a week. For me, it's much more about building that relationship with offerings, communication, and a relationship, if you will. So I do things regarding death that are very simple. Keeping out fresh water on my altar for the spirits, lighting incense for my spirits, and keeping a candle or a lantern going for them. But then I also do a lot of things that are physical. So I take care of gravestones, the forgotten dead. So these are people that passed away long enough ago that there are no living people to tend to their graves anymore, but not so long ago that we're talking about like ancient civilizations. Like, I'm not an archaeologist. But I do stuff like that. I'm
sure you are. Just kidding.
I've done
witchy
things like
Indiana Jones, if you will.
I'm literally Indiana Jones, guys. I am Harrison Ford. But I'll do things like maintaining forgotten gravestones. I actually got my mom into it at one point, and her and I would take care of these graves that we found that, were kind of forgotten in the woods, and it was a maintenance thing. And it's really important to me. That's a really, really important part of my practice, is kind of helping and taking care of the forgotten dead. And then we have this sort of relationship. And then just as one might call to like a deity, for example, I call to spirits and I ask them to aid and assist me in my magic. What about you?
So I'm much like you on the offerings front. Like, I have like at my kitchen altar, which to me, like, I used to have like my family altar, which I considered my hearth and my home. But as like I've moved through my practice, I realized my kitchen is my hearth and my home. And I realized that a bunch of the spirits that I was connecting with, like, that's where we gathered, like in the kitchen, and we would cook together, we would talk, and we would cry, so like it was our place. So now I leave my offerings at my kitchen for like all the spirits that connect with me, and it's our place to to revisit that feeling of like when they were alive. At least that's how it was in my family, the whole like kitchen thing. But that's also the place where any spirit like that is not necessarily like related to me that I leave offerings and stuff at. But I try to do that. Well, I have been doing it daily. I've actually been keeping up with it, so I'm very proud of myself for keeping up with it. But yeah, but and just like you, like with spell work, before I do spell work, I always ask my guides and spirits to like lend me a hand, and also the deities I'm working with. But I do make sure to ask any spirits who are watching over me to lend me a hand in my spell work. And that's why I think it's so important to like leave offerings of like thanks and stuff like that at my altar daily, because they help me all the time, not just for spell work. But other than that, and when it comes to transformation, I do rot jars, burning rituals, and I even consider shadow work, working with death. Yeah. So, like, okay. Yeah, rot jars are basically like compost jars with a magical purpose. Like, I consider what I need to rot and decay that will feed a fresh new start or a new beginning. Like, you know, the important things with these jars is that you use like all organic or compostable material.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're writing something out, you need to use like unbleached natural paper and non-toxic ink. Like, I try to correspond with like the natural ingredients to what my intention is for listens. Like, for instance, like, let's say you are in college and the major you're shooting for is not what you want anymore, so you're changing directions. Like, I would add an apple to the jar for knowledge, like you're changing where you're directing your knowledge. But I find rot jars like a great depiction of death and new beginnings. And the same with shadow work, because when we do shadow work, you know, just as you said, like at the beginning of of this discussion, is that like we die all the time, like part of us dies. And I think like shadow work helps us move through that, where we accept endings and make changes where we need to make changes. So I try to do like shadow work every single dark moon, or when I feel called to do it, because sometimes shadow work doesn't align with just the dark moon. But yeah, that's how I personally work with death.
I think a lot of people do death work, if you will, or magic that deals with death without even realizing it a lot of the time. I think it's something that we sometimes incidentally find ourselves in dealing with without necessarily making it a purposeful thing. I actually have found in my life, I've spent probably the last decade working towards doing more sorts of magic that protects me from the dead, if you will, because if you start working with spirits, you'll find that they just show up all of the time, even when you don't want them there.
Don't know about that.
Yeah, yes, you do.
Don't know about that at all.
Yes, she does. It's something that will come up quite frequently. And especially if you're somebody who's maybe naturally sensitive, I guess you could say, towards that sort of thing. You know that I don't like the term like natural. I was a born witch. But I do think that people are maybe more open to or sensitive towards different things, right? Which are not necessarily witchcraft related. For example, you have people that are psychic mediums that are not witches. And I think that is a really big misnomer, that because you are somebody who believes in or talks with the dead, that you are somehow spiritual. And that is not always the case, and is a really big misnomer. I know that in my life, I talk with the dead. I see the dead, if you will. Sometimes I wish I didn't. And I think that, at least for me in my own personal practice, I have used a lot of witchcraft to kind of find the balance between talking with and seeing the dead when I want to versus when I do not want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like, I think boundaries. Yeah, no, definitely. I think boundaries are so important, and
learning that balance. Learning the balance.
Yeah,
between,
I find
when you want the spirits,
yeah, because if you don't have your boundaries up, they're just gonna show up all the time. No, thank you.
All the time, and like half the time you're like, "Why are you here? What do you want?" And then they just leave, and you're like, "Okay."
They just leave.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for passing through.
Thank you so much. It is 3:15 in the morning. It is 3:15 in the morning. Oh, why are you here?
That's when our guards are down, and so you know, like, we don't have that conscious like barrier.
That is where the term witching hour comes from. Did you know that?
Yep.
And it depends on different schools of thought as to when the witching hour is, but the idea originated from like the medieval period, because it was the only time of day that there wasn't somebody like actively praying, was the thought, because everyone's asleep. And that's when the devils could come out to play. Isn't that interesting?
I really like, I think when we're at our most relaxed, like, even like, that's why sometimes we can see them during the day and sometimes why we can't see them during the day is when we're like at our most relaxed. Then we are like, we're paying attention more and we can start to see things. But when we're stressed out and stuff like that, which a lot of us are more now in days, that we don't see them as often. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. Okay. Well, so ultimately, no, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to ask you about like the spirits and or deities that you work with.
So I specifically work with Santa Muerte. I'm sure people have seen my altar and her presence being there. She is the Holy Dead. There's a lot of kind of whitewash misconceptions, I guess you could say, about her. Ultimately, she is death, man. She comes for us, and she is what's the word? Unapologetic, I guess is the word you can say. She's the patron saint of Narcos and the Forgotten, because she's the great equalizer. I think that there is a lot of this kind of modern, and by modern, I mean the last few years, misconception that she isn't something to be necessarily afraid of because, you know, anyone can work with her and blah, 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 blah. But in reality, she is neutral ground. She is the great equalizer. You know what I'm saying? Which means while it can be beautiful and it can be incredible simultaneously, it is unapologetic and she will always say yes. And that is great. That is also really fucking scary because that means that she will also say yes to the things that maybe you couldn't ask
aren't necessarily good for you.
Yeah. Or good in general. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, death and death magic is great if you kind of use it responsibly, in my opinion. And I think that there's been this big movement recently of Santa Muerte not being so scary. And it's like, no, she's terrifying. Beautiful, incredible, amazing. I don't know the words I'm looking for here, but it is incredible, and it is also something to not take lightly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that if you have a fear of those sort of things, it's probably for a reason, and we should respect that.
Yeah, honor it.
What about you?
Yeah. So the main goddesses I work with in my practice right now are Hecate and Persephone, and they both deal with death in their own way. Hecate is the goddess of the liminal, in between, and the crossroads. There are like a few ways of working with her in regards to death. When we are like stuck or lost when it comes to our own transformation, we can call upon her to show us the right way of moving forward, or even to help us move forward on a path that we know we need to take. But in regards to spirits, like I find that she is great with helping with trapped spirits who don't know exactly how to move forward, especially those who are hurting, who have gone through something traumatic. I think she's like a great goddess for like nurses or those who work in funeral homes or anything that really relates to ushering people to the other side. The work that you do only strengthens your relationship with her and could even be considered an offering. As for Persephone, not only is she the goddess of spring, but she is a goddess of death. You know, she represents that important duality that we were talking about life and death and how like they're both part of us. She helps us find the beauty in transformation and the importance of dealing like with the hard stuff, our shadow selves, in order to blossom and grow. Persephone also brings up about how owning our sexuality can be a hugely transformative experience. It is part of like the journey from adolescence to adulthood, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, that death. And while you may not equate sex to death, it's part of the cycle of life. It is about leaving our old selves behind. I mean, the French call like orgasms like le petit amour. I think I said that wrong, but le petite more, but anyways, which means little death due to the transformative and renewing and even liminal experience. That is like one of the reasons I like to work with Persephone for like sex magic, like after you feel reborn, and even that energy can be used to unblock your path and put energy towards growth. When it comes to spirits, I call upon her to watch like over loved ones who I know who have passed and went to the other side. But yeah, that's how the goddesses I work with.
I love that though. So kind of, I guess, as a closing segment, a closing little bit for this segment, I would be really interested to hearing what our listeners, what they believe in when it regards to death. Like what is your take on death, as it were? And I'm gonna open up a poll on Spotify because I would like to hear what people have, their opinions on death. Does this matter to you? Is this a part of your practice? I mean, I'm sure it matters to you. Death matters to all of us to some varying degree. But is it a part of your practice? And if so, what does that look like? I think Maria and I would both be really interested in hearing that.
Yeah, especially as you like, there's so many different ways to work with death, and everyone does it so uniquely. And yeah,
very interested. And maybe we can share some of these answers on social media, obviously with privacy in the future. So we would really like to hear that, you guys. So we'd like to hear what your take and your opinions are on this, or you can email us and we can kind of share it from there. It's your decision, of course. But yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about this. You know how important this is to me.
Yes. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So, Robin, what is stirring your cauldron this week? You made me laugh, and I completely broke character.
I'm so sorry. Would you like to have a very horny take two?
Yes. So, Robin, what is stirring your cauldron this week?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Basically, right now, what's stirring my cauldron is when magic works and just spell work in general, and like how horny I am for that. So essentially, I did a Run Devil Run spell candle a couple weeks back, based off of some situations that were going on behind the scenes, like in my private life, that was making me have an aneurysm. And I posted on social media. And then my Run Devil Run candle was like jet fucking black, like jet black. And if you know anything about candle work, that kind of prayer candle spell work, when they are jet black like that, that basically says that there is things that are blocking you from this spell being successful. There's just too many things in your way.
But 1 second, I make a note real quick, just so people know. Like if you add, like, let's say that your candle's not black the entire time. If you have crystals or like herbs just sitting at the bottom and it's just burning
absolutely.
up.
Yeah. So this
I don't want someone to be like, I'm cursed.
So this kind of spell work candle was only very, very lightly dressed with oil in the beginning, and that was it. So just to go off what Maria's saying, that kind of black glass is an indicator of that. There was nothing else in the candle but like literally like 3 drops of oil. And so I was like, great. Especially considering what was going on was essentially there was a person that is obsessed with me. Very sad for them. They could do better with obsessions. Who essentially was like being really toxic and unkind, and it was just psycho. So I was like, great. So I did a triple reversal spell. Just basically, it's not hexing anyone, but it is just sending back essentially whatever was sent my direction. And this candle is burning so sexy, so clear, so I had like the smallest amount of soot at the top of the glass at the very beginning, and it has been nothing but clean, pristine burning since then. So love to see it. Excited to see how that's going to unfold. I don't know. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of why my last candle was like pure black. But I am excited because I feel like there's a little bit more that was going on there than maybe I realized. And I'm just excited to see how that kind of manifests. Remember that sometimes, guys, people didn't hex you. They just sent you back whatever you sent their way. And it's not any deeper than that. So, you know, just be nice. Be a kind person. Don't go out there, you know, doing bad magic if you can't handle the heat when it comes back at you. So I just think that's really sexy and hot and beautiful, and I am very excited about it.
We love our 7-day candles that work. Yes, we do.
So horny for it. It's like, you don't even, I can't even put it into words. It's like, live, laugh, love.
Yeah, you know, especially like when spell work, like you see, like you do the spell and then you see immediate like results. You're like, oh yes. Yeah.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is when I started the Run Devil Run candle, a person who I thought was maybe involved in it immediately like lost a whole bunch of shit going on in their life, and I was just like, yikes. Yikes. Okay. There's a lot happening here to unpack, but all right, friend, again, not hexing or cursing anybody, just sending back, returning to sender, if you will. So I love it. 12 out of 10. Anyway, that's what's stirring my cauldron this week. Just being the most sexy of bitches. So, Maria, what's not stirring your cauldron this week?
Well, let me tell you. So, we may or may not have talked about this before. I'm sure that we have, but like, I don't know, just how people judge other people's practices by what they see online and by what others post online. I think it's important to know that when someone posts, they're only posting the tip of the iceberg, even if it's just like what they are practicing or even the information that they are giving. Like someone can't write an entire book and like post it into their captions or anything like that. And I think that's important because a lot of people would be like, you left this out or you did this. And it's like, you know, witchy online creators do not have like, one, we don't have the space to write out all that stuff. And like, we're giving what we think is important to share at the time. It's not that we're uneducated about the subject. It's just that, you know,
I'm sorry, but even if we are uneducated about a subject, it is literally impossible to put the expectation out there that creators are educated in all things at all times. And if you think that a creator has done something wrong, instead of being like, can you believe, why don't you correct them, you know, in a helpful way?
Yeah. And this is not about like being right or wrong. Like if someone's like doing something super inappropriate, of course, call them out. But I also think like it's inappropriate to call out someone being like, well, you didn't do this. Or like, I think it's great to offer more information on your own page about a certain subject. You're like, oh, well, they left this out. Maybe I should write it here. You know, I think it's just when we write towards someone else, like, well, what, you know, the whole whataboutism, like to add more, like, I don't know. It just feels so inappropriate and kind of like snarky and pretentious to be like, well, I know more than you, so here you go. And I just think if people put the energy towards their own stuff, I think that would save like so much like witchcraft community related drama. In my opinion, like I think all of us.
I also think too that like there also is this big pressure on creators to like always take into account every single like person's like path and then educate from that perspective instead of educating from like our own perspective, if that makes sense.
Exactly. I think
again, not to condone like appropriative behavior. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that like, for example, I don't care about the threefold fucking law. I don't care about it at all. Why would I? I'm not a Wiccan, and I think it's also been taken massively out of context. But anyway, that doesn't matter. So why would I am not about do as thou will and yet harm none or whatever. I don't give a shit about that. Why should I?
Yeah. I think people forget that all magical practices look different. Like your correspondence to something might not be the same as someone else's. Well, it doesn't mean that other person is wrong.
Right.
And I think we need to take that into consideration before we start calling like I'm so sick of people calling out other people on social media, and it's like honestly it makes that person look like a giant like dickhead. And you know, it's just I don't know, I just wish people would be more kind to one another. And if you're going to educate and you don't think something was representative in someone else's work, then maybe you should take it upon yourself to take up the reins and do it yourself. Not call out the person, not be a butthead, but to be like, well, here's my information on the subject while not calling that person out. But that way that, you know, we all learn and we learn from each other, and we take in those unique views that what people have to offer. But yeah. I just think that everyone has an opinion and everyone wants to be loud with their opinion. And I think that causes a lot of animosity in the community. But yeah.
What's that expression? Opinions are like assholes.
Yeah, everyone has one.
If you have just joined us this week, every single week we talk about creators that we are loving right now. These are organic and natural, organic, free range.
Free range.
Cage free. These are cage-free finds, guys. These are finds that Maria and I have found that we are just liking and vibing with. These are not sponsored posts. Don't fucking stop messaging us to be on the podcast. It's so annoying. It's really annoying because I feel like we talk about it every time. Like, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's fine. I don't care how much you're going to pay us.
They don't listen, so they don't know.
Yeah, I know.
They don't know.
You're right. Anyway, what creator are you loving right now, my love?
So, I'm loving her handle is Kate Belew on Instagram, and she's part of the Tamed Wild team, and she does a podcast with them too. But I want to talk about her word witch rituals and stuff like that she does. So as some of you know, I'm really into word witchery. Like I love like using words of power, writing out spells as like spells of their own. And that's what Kate does, is that she teaches you how to do that, how to use writing as a form of spell work. And she like her newsletter that she has like gives you like a prompt to do and things like that. And I find that stuff really interesting, and it's great to see like another creator educating others about it, because it's I don't know, I find it interesting and I really love doing it myself. But
that's really cool.
Yeah.
It does.
Like it's so like she's really into like poetry and using that as spell work, and it's so beautiful, because I love coming up with like chants and stuff like that for when we do rituals and things like that. So and it's important to realize that those are spells of their own, like a spell within a spell. Just like how affirmations are, right, Robin?
I will kill myself right here on the spot. Just kidding, guys. That was a joke. I'm doing just fine.
So who have you been loving?
So I have been loving, I found them on TikTok. I think they're called Wallflowerscents, but they do these candles that are done in like cement, like poured cement holders. And they've got crystals that they put in there that is like purposefully put in its own kind of like design, but also almost like a grid, if you will, like. And they'll put sometimes herbs and stuff into the candles themselves, but it's like really, it's done almost like so delicately and minimally, but it's so striking at the same time. Does that make sense? Like there's somehow very, very little that's going into the spells. Excuse me, the candles, but simultaneously it's like powerful. Like it's a powerful image. I really like it. I think it's so beautiful. Yeah. I just think it's really clever, and I really like that they're in concrete containers and they're wood wick candles. So that's cool. I haven't bought one yet, but I'm probably going to. Don't tell my husband. He'll never know.
Are candles the new cards?
Literally. Candles are not the new cards, but he and I have agreed to not buy ourselves anything like that right now. And I'm like, but what if I just did? What if I just did?
What if I have a list to go? So when we're ready, I'm going to buy all these things.
You think that I should not have these things? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us today. We hope that you will join us again on Friday, March 18th for our 5th episode of season 3. We're going to have a guest for that episode as well, and we have something very fun planned for it. So I hope you guys like it. We are also doing in-between episodes that are called Coffee Talk. I will be announcing the theme of this month over the weekend, so right after this episode comes out. So you can keep an eye out on our Instagrams or on our Twitter. You can follow us on Coffee and Cauldrons on Twitter or Coffee and Cauldrons Pod on Instagram, or you can go to coffeeandcauldrons.com where you can find everything.
Everything. So, or you can even join us on our Discord tier, which is First Coven, on Patreon, so we can answer your questions in our part 2 next time. And if you are loving Coffee and Cauldrons, can you please take a moment and review us on Apple Podcasts or even on Spotify? We would appreciate the reviews because it helps us be seen.
Yes.
And yeah.
We appreciate those of you who have done it, and we appreciate those of you who will do it. And
all the kisses.
All the kisses. And if you join our podcast, or not our podcast, hello, you're on our podcast right now. Welcome to it. Did you know that was happening?
I wasn't aware. What have we been doing?
If you join our Patreon, you will get to hear us for an additional 30-ish minute episode for being in the tiers casting and up.
So, again, this is Coffee and Cauldrons.
With Robin from At a Tired Witch on Instagram.
And I'm Maria from At Maria the Arcane on Instagram. You ready? Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it. Right. 1, 2, 3. Bye, witches! I think that was perfect, right? Right? Was that good? It was on my end. On my end, it was perfect. So you could just shove it.
Shit out, yeah.
Exactly.